So let me create a similar morph to this. I'll show you how I've made that, and also maybe apply something like that to the dress. So if I wanted to make the dress slightly longer or shorter, this is something you can do with Hexagon really easily. And also if you have a jacket that needs to open a little bit wider, if you need to lift up a shirt a little bit more, if you make pants a little bit more expanded and you don't want to rely on the smoothing modifiers, very easy to do. So the Hexagon works in that all items from your scene or from the selected object are being sent over. So if I select Jacqueline now, or my gray figure, all these items will appear in Hexagon. It's as easy as heading over to File, Send To, and I've got a few options here, ZBrush or Hexagon. So let's do Hexagon first, and then we'll do ZBrush, because it works just the same. So you just click that, and that will launch Hexagon and make a new scene and bring over all items into Hexagon. I don't know why this news window always pops up. It's one of those things. I keep clicking this and then I keep saying okay, but it just keeps coming up and it's just fine. So the beauty of this workflow is that you don't have to worry about settings. So it will bring over the low resolution figure into Hexagon, and it will imply a smoothing modifier if you wish. So you can see that the figure is a little bit chunky, but you can watch this smooth if you like by clicking this. So I don't mind. I like it a bit chunky because that means I can see the geometry a bit better. But you don't have to worry about settings. I guess that's my point. So you can go and you can play around with the shading options at the bottom here. You don't have to do it, but you know, there's certain matte caps that you can apply, and I hope you can see this. This is just fine. On the right hand side here by default, you have not only the figure but also every single item in your scene. So a bit like what it was in DAZ Studio, and you can just go and select whatever you need. The framework this is based on is a little bit, outdated. So sometimes when you change the size of the screen, it's all a little bit slow and clunky, but it's for quick fixes. It's just fine. So it kind of combines object mode and edit mode into one interface, if you will. You can select an object, like in this case my dress here, so Rycroft dress, select that, and now I'm essentially in kind of an object selection mode. That's this little block up here. This is face selection mode, this is edge selection mode, this is vertex selection mode, and this is a combination of it. I need the edge selection mode, so I'll select that, and my interface changes a little bit. So whatever is selected is currently turning a little bit transparent there. So if I wanted to select the sleeves, zoom in with the mouse button, middle mouse button, click it, and then you can move the pan basically side to side. These are the things I want to select, so I just need to select one. This is an edge of the sleeve. If I wanted to make the sleeve a little bit shorter, I select the sleeve, or like one face, and select loop, and that'll create this loop selection here. And that's already pretty much the magic to it. Alt left click will make you pan around the figure or the selection currently. And the cool thing is that it has something along the lines of what does Blender call this again? Proportional editing. In Hexagon it's called soft selection. You select that with F, and that gives you all these little red dots here. You can also go into the right here, select soft selection. That does the same thing, and you see the area of influence. We have a radius and a softness, and in my case I can go and increase or decrease the radius and increase or decrease the softness. So see what happens to the red dots as I increase and decrease the radius. That's the zone of influence. So maybe we don't want quite that much. We just want this area here, the whole sleeve area. And then there's also the softness itself, like how harsh I want this to be from where I'm selecting this. So larger radius and softness will give you less or more red dots. So we'll try something like this. And just like we've known the manipulator from DAZ Studio, I'm going to left click and drag the blue thing up, and that'll shift the whole sleeve up now. And that'll basically create the fit I'm looking for. And that's kind of nice. And you can play around with it. We can this little yellow thing in the middle will go and increase and decrease the size of my selected area. And if you don't want the selection to go up all to the whole sleeve there, you can just go and decrease your radius a bit, and just make the cuffs a bit shorter if you wanted to do that. Whoops. And that's really all you do. And so if it's a quick fix like that, it's perfect to do it, because now that we've made our change, all we need to do is head over back to File in Hexagon and say File, Send to DAZ Studio. And that will now not really do anything. Kind of Hexagon just lurks around in the background, so you have to manually switch back to DAZ Studio, where we get an exciting little dialog box. So you need to know about these options before this makes sense, but if you're already familiar with creating morphs in Blender, this will make a lot of sense to you. So this first option is here: do you want to create a morph, or do you want to create a prop, in which case everything that's in the Hexagon scene will just be sent over straight as geometry and will appear in your scene. So we don't want to do that. Create a morph and copy materials, or copy materials, we're not interested in that. We just want to create a morph. And then in here, if you open this Hexagon morph, it will have that familiar reverse deformations dialog. So this is exactly what Morph Loader would give you. And in this case, I do have a custom character, and I also have the character in a pose. If you see that here, there is a small pose applied to it. So I need reverse deformations on. So I need to go and right click and select yes. Just in case you're not familiar with that, if you have a basic Genesis figure in the A pose and you would send that over, make a change and bring it back either to the base figure or to an item of clothing, then you don't have any deformations. But if you use a custom character morph, or you use a pose of the character, you need to enable reverse deformation so that DAZ Studio, or rather Morph Loader, can understand, hey, you have the Genesis base figure and you've derived something from it. So I just need to reverse calculate whatever you've already dialed in before you've sent it over to your editing software. This is often, if you don't use that and bring the morph in, then you have screwy fits, and the moment you dial up the morph and the clothing doesn't fit and it all looks horrible. And so if you change this to reverse deformations the moment you have anything like a pose or a custom character on it, you're gonna be fine. So let's hit accept. And that is it. Morph created successfully, because Hexagon and DAZ Studio have already negotiated the correct resolution and all that, and we see essentially nothing just yet. We just have one thing that's called Hexagon Morph, and if I dial that up, that is exactly the change I've made in Hexagon. And that's just really, really easy. If you go, I'll show you this again in a moment, because it's just very quick to make fixes like that. You probably don't want this to be called Hexagon Morph, so you can go and click that little gear icon, head over to parameter settings and call it something else. So like, cuffs 2, I'll call it, just because, I already have my cuffs length thing. And you can also change the path here if you want. You can also use limits. I just probably don't want this to go into the negative, so you set this to 0 and then click OK. Now it's called cuffs. You can call it right cuff, I suppose. We could call it right cuff. Cuff R and cuff L. Why don't we do that? Let's do that. So cuffs right, I'll call it. Cuffs right. Perfect. Let me go and do this again a little bit quicker. So I find this a really nice method to make quick fixes, like including the skirt. And let's go do this other cuff. And once again, you can go and hit File, Send to Hexagon. And then something should happen along those lines. There we go. We have it. Select the dress. Oh, now we have both items in the scene. I think if the whole item was already in the scene, you don't need it again. So it doesn't always work all that well. If you send new items over, just make sure you close Hexagon down. Just creates a new. There was a time in which there was a new instance of Hexagon open, so that you had multiple instances, one per send over. So I guess that got changed. So once again, select the dress. Then go and select your whatever selection you need, faces, edges. In my case, I need edges. Select one of those. Select loop. There's also shortcuts for this. And make sure you enable that soft selection here, because that's just, I find that really magic. And I found it easier to understand than, I suppose because it has less options, than the proportional editing in Blender. Do that, make it slightly smaller. And that's already all there's to it. And now that we're happy with the fit, or with any other fit that you like, File, Send to DAZ Studio. In this dialog, I can just go and name my morph as I want. So I'm going to have this just morph. I suppose name, I don't need this to be hexagon morph. I want this to be cuffs left. And once again, I need reverse deformations for my character here. And I suppose that's all I need. Boom. Morph created successfully. And now I have one for the left-hand side. And this poking here, that's just something that the smoothing modifier will iterate away. That didn't come over from Hexagon. That's just there. Cuffs left, cuff right. So it's quite nice. So when you have that, and now you think, hey, maybe I need to adjust the length of the skirt. I think all we need to do really is head over. Set these back to 0. Head over back into Hexagon. I think. Don't quote me on this. I'm figuring this out as I go along. Let's see if we can go and pick the... Can we deselect something? Dude, seriously. It hasn't seen an update for a while. Can we not select the bottom of the skirt? No, we can't. Why not? Does the skirt have a rim? No, we can't select anything anymore. So I suppose that's a little bug. So I suppose in order for that to work, really, we have to just close Hexagon down. Once you've made a morph, I think that's probably the safest option. Close Hexagon down and just go and send the whole thing over again. It doesn't, whoops, wrong option there. It doesn't take all that long. So send to Hexagon. I like that literally everything comes across so that you get a perfect representation of your character. So rather than having to work on one thing in isolation, I kind of like the idea that we have literally everything. And if you do prefer the smooth look, then you can have Hexagon imply the polygons if you like so. I tend to disable that, but you know, let me see if I can show you some other options here. There's other lighting models that you can apply. It's not great, but you know, it does work. So it's one of those things. Pick one that you like. These are basically matte caps essentially. And then there's also a version with shadows, but I don't find that very helpful with modeling. It's just if you want a tad more realism, you can do that. I usually tend to switch the shadows off, and I tend to be in something very, yeah, that'll work as well. It's a bit of cartoon shading applied. I tend to be in this non-smoothed version. So select the dress first. Select loop. Select the total bottom of my skirt there. Soft selection. And make the skirt longer or shorter. So maybe make it longer. Go over, put it over the knees, and then go and make it slightly wider on the bottom. Very nice for quick fixes. So maybe move it back a bit, something like that. That's our morph. Good stuff. And it's just so easy to do. And then you just go send it over. Send back to DAZ Studio. Morph gets created, no resolution issues. And let's call it skirt length. Reverse deformations, yes. And hit accept. And we have skirt length. adjustable. Kind of nice. Sometimes works in reverse, but you know, obviously you'd have to make another morph for that, because it just, reverse calculations usually don't work well, like minus calculations. So I recommend you set this always to 0 and just let the morph be between the original and whatever change you've made. And if you wanted a skirt shorter morph, you'd have to make another one just to make the fit proper. Also, for a skirt like that, if you didn't want to lengthen the trim but the upper part instead, can you grab the loop above the trim? Yes, you can do that too. I think I'm gonna have to go and close Hexagon again. It's a bit, you know, it takes a little bit of getting used to. And much like with DAZ Studio, there's not that much documentation around it. There are some tutorials on YouTube, I think by the user used to be called Easy Hexagon. He made a great series about this. There's also Vladimir Chopin. He also has a great series, like really old series on Hexagon. But the thing is, Hexagon itself hasn't actually changed, so that's kind of nice. So if you're thinking like this part of the skirt, for example, let me see, dress. So you can either use the edges that I selected, so it kind of depends on the geometry, and then hit loop. Sometimes that doesn't quite work depending on the geometry, but you can also go and pick faces. So maybe face selection is easier, and sometimes loop works. Sometimes ring needs to be selected instead of loop. You can also select two things in between. So if you're familiar with these selection tools, like from here to there, I don't know if the geometry will allow it, but there's this between thing here that sometimes, if the geometry is connected, you can do it. Of course, now that I'm trying to show you this, it doesn't really work. Let's show from here to there. So with shift you can multi-select and then go between. Yeah, there we go. So it's just a matter of selecting the correct pieces, and then, you know, making sure you select what you want changed. You can even, there's other pieces you can do it like polygon by polygon, but there's also here brush selections, I believe, like paint selection mode. That means you can paint something on. This is kind of the hardest bit in every 3D application, I find, like making correct selections to the area that you want to change. But if you're patient enough and if you learn the tools of how to select things, you can do it. And then soft selection is of course your friend. That'll be able to just make all kinds of, you know, bulges and influence areas so that it doesn't look as terrible as without soft selection, which would do this, which is terrible. So then, you know, the soft selection, you can make it smaller and just, you know, for little bulges or whatnot, for things that poke through. So this is also great for fixing poke through. Just select the area that you want to change. Make sure you have soft selection enabled. Just go. It's a bit like sculpting. So the bit of history about Hexagon, this went through several owners as well, until DAZ bought it and just integrated it, and then made a few changes to it that made it integrate with DAZ Studio, but didn't do much else with it. The lead programmer, I believe, who worked on Hexagon used to be at ZBrush as a marketing manager. I thought that was quite cool. I forgot his name, but it's one of those things. Mr. L, Mr. Neville, very good to see you. Maternity dress, exactly, Alto. But yeah, so this is kind of how easy it is to create morphs, quick fit morphs with Hexagon and DAZ Studio. You don't have to worry about anything along the lines of resolution and whatnot. You just bring it in and you just save it with your scene, and all these things will be saved. So that's kind of nice. Good for fixing poke through, good for making fit morphs.